hand. And how scary was that? People
Very.
waking up right now, they don't know how to get out of bed and put their socks on or without their drugs first and stuff like that. It's a terrifying thing. So that ambivalence isn't necessarily always just resistance. It can also be just this person, I don't know what to do. I really don't. I'm so afraid of that. And we brought back, boy, I snuck a lot of old stuff in our discussion on Tuesday, didn't I? Again, that approach avoidance thing, a lot of stuff. And yes, working with ambivalence. Now, what we're going to see is that there are two steps with that, actually. Not only working with ambivalence, and that's getting that person to roll into that place where they're at least willing to consider this. In the very beginning, if you could get just, maybe, yeah, I could think about it. That's good enough to start with. But then, there's another issue with that. Once resolving ambivalence, then we still have resolving confidence. And what do I mean by that, do you suppose? In other words, it's one thing to decide I want to. It's another to believe I can. And so it's both of those together that we're working with, and you're paying attention to. You're listening to everything. That client, hearing, experiencing, feeling that client in a way. Yeah, it's not just I want to, but then we also have to work and pay attention to and help with the, not only I want to, but now do I believe I can? And that's a big one too, the confidence issue. But all right, good. Another wow point. Yes, a wow point.
Well, let me see if I can explain this in a way that y'all understand. I was thinking about when you talked about resistance from addicts who feel that they're empowered of their life, they're getting everything they want by smoothing people over or whatever, to becoming powerless, wanting to change that, then to become empowered again.
Yes, very well. Nice way to say that. And it's like one of your, I think it was Herman maybe said, you know what, all this stuff about me, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, and things like, gang, it's not that we want to necessarily shut down the entire system. That person's got some good things going for them. Think about it once again. They're good at a lot of stuff. They figured out how to get 30, 40 pills a day or something like that. They're good at stuff. And what it is remember, what did we say with that? Empowerment, yes, we want that person to still feel that. And what did we say? We're not going to shut down energy. We're going to what? Redirect it. That energy. I mean, you think about somebody out there right now, and they're severely addicted, and their life is being completely dictated by their addiction and everything else, and they are surviving, and they're doing pretty good right now. Of course, that's a relative statement, pretty good. But they're managing to survive, and they're doing this. If they would to redirect that energy they're using to survive every day this severe addiction, they could be the CEO of a major corporation. You see what I'm saying with that? They could be making $1 million a year, running a corporation or something. They're that good at how they're managing people, managing this, managing that, and everything else. They would be one hell. And so it's not stop that energy. Again, when we talk about the addiction survival persona, what we do is we change that. We don't stop it necessarily. We adjust the serious things. We've probably got some nuts and bolts that need some real good tightening up and stuff, but don't stop it so much as redirect that energy in a new way and help that person start to feel that and believe that kind of a thing. So yes, very good, fantastic. And I saw right here. Did you have your hand?
Just in regards to ambivalence, just the difference between it is going to be expected, and when you encounter it, don't just view that person as being full of shit and not wanting to change.
That's it. Stop being so damn mad at your client. And again, and that's why ambivalence, it's kind of like resistance per se. And that is, instead of seeing that as a pathology, see that as it's a very real part of the change process. And of course, that person is our client in the beginning. The idea of letting this go for a day, let alone for the rest of your life, and things like that. No wonder that terrifies that person. And we did sneak in last time. Don't forget the two big, actually three big fears. But number one, letting go of the drug. Number two, letting go of that addiction survival persona. Well, they don't have to. No, we redirect that to a more positive way of life. And what was the third fear again? The fear of failure. And that's a part of that empowerment also. Helping this person deal with that. Not only self-efficacy, but outcome efficacy. That this is a distinct possibility in this person's life. They can do this. That kind of stuff like that. All right, fantastic. Any other wow points from last time? Any other? And oh, by the way, I was up in my shop in a dust bowl of toxic sawdust yesterday, or last night. Coca-Cola
So
and
you don't have the
Bacardi and
corona.
Pernod. Beautiful, beautiful African and Caribbean woods, but they're all toxic dust.
Do you have a mask?
No.
Who are you, Dan? Come on. What the hell is wrong with you?
I don't
Killing
have a
himself
motorcycle
is a
helmet
drug.
either. But I don't either. So besides that mask, what happens is I do wear safety glasses, and when I put that mask on, it clouds up my safety glasses. So anyway.
You went with the cloud.
But anyway, so
Real
part.
mask.
I know, but yeah, then I'm walking around like somebody in a sci-fi movie.
No one will sneak up on you.
Right. But any other wild points from guys? We all this stuff, and remember, we're still at the assessment thing. Don't forget assessment. Yeah, we need to collect that information. We got to do that. Not only to fill out those damn stupid forms. Yes, we got to do that, but because if you're going to be able to establish that relationship with and really, truly, effectively work with this person, you need to know who they are. And too many counselors are still guilty of, they already know who they are. This is John the alcoholic, this is the dead, this is the dope fiend, the this, the death, the death. Stop it, knock it off. You've got to know that person. And then establishing that relationship. And throughout the course of that, how we can, with motivational interviewing, we can then use that as a way to get this motor. Maybe in the beginning, and we're lucky if we can just get the key in the ignition. We had a good day, and things like that. But get that rolling. So guys, hopefully, always remember that. Yes?
I want to get a justification because I just, when we did our definitions in this motivational interviewing under the rule, and we was talking about understanding the client's motivation, and my definition was try to understand what the client's motivation is and how it's working for them right now. Then the counselor can redirect their motivation toward the path of trying. But then I had other words that shouldn't have been there, but you said to just think about change.
All right.
Instead of trying to get the addiction recovery that they need and possibly, you know what I'm saying,
Okay.
deep inside really want it.
And that's it. And when we talk about understand the motivation, and that's a general term in motivational interviewing,
Right.
for us, the best way to frame that is to understand why this is still working for them right now. What is it about that current hedonic calculus that's still working? And what's still working is what is the power. Here's the motivation right here, you guys. The negative reinforcement stuff. Again, we humans, we don't ruin our lives. We don't self-destruct for the fun of it. There are reasons why we do everything. There are reasons. This person is wildly nuts, insane, irrational, and everything as it may look from the outside, what this person is doing. And yes, they are aware of. That's why last week when we said stop just focusing on this. They already know this. The negatives, the consequences. What we need to understand is, what is it about their experience, their cognitive negotiation, their ones and twos, their threes and fours? What is it right now that's making this still worth it? This atrocious price they're paying. What is it? Where's the motivation? Why is it this is still worth it? They're not stupid. It's not, and that kind of a thing. Why is this still worth it? That's what we need to understand. What is it specifically about that individual, unique human individual, that is making this still worth it? And that's where we need to go with that. And once we can start to discover that, then we have a sense of where we go in terms of what are we going to talk about? How are we going to focus on it? What are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with that? And the outlay of that treatment plan. Why then do we once again need to know the past? Because one of the best ways to understand the past is that's going to help us understand why is it, whatever this is, why is it still worth it? Does that make sense? And so yes, understanding that client's motivation. And for us, what we're talking is understanding this right here, why is it still worth it? How do we help make that not worth it anymore? Well, the best way we can is, well, number one, we can't change what happened in the past. Number two, we can't change most of what's happening in that person's life right now. Whatever the situation may be, we can't change that. It's not like they come into treatment and we give them a deed to a new house and a title to a new car and all this other stuff and magically fix all the medical and everything else. You're all better, now go out there and be happy. No. The most important thing we can do is change their cognitive negotiation with that. Change the way this person has learned how to relate with and survive through those poltergeists in their life, those unpleasant now realities and things like that. So that as they change the way, and what was another thing I said last time? You guys never forget this. This is so damn important. We're working with a client and they've got a 1 or a 2 that happened 23 years ago.
But it's current.
But the fact is this, every time you use that past as a way to understand or justify your present, that's not the past anymore. It's the now. Does that make sense? We wonder why. That was 23 years ago. How can this have so much control over? That was 23 years ago. Come on. No, it wasn't. It was 5 minutes ago. Do you see what I'm saying with that?
You
And every time that person,
created you into who you are now.
well, and every time that person uses that past as a way to understand, justify their present.
Right.
I'm doing this because that bad thing happened to me. I'm doing it. I can't let go. And all that kind of stuff, you guys. And what is that? Well, that's not 23 years ago anymore. It's right now. And that's why that stuff can, wield so much still power over that person. Because they haven't let it be their past. It's a part of their everyday experience. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And again, helping that person's got to understand that and see that. Stop using that past that way. And I don't mean that in the typical counselor way, or you're just using that as a cheap-ass excuse. No, they're using that as a way to still understand their now. Why is this bad thing happening to me now? Well, I know why, because that bad thing happened to me then. No, that's not why. Not until you make that connection. And now that bad thing that happened a long time ago isn't a long time ago anymore. It's right now that happened. Does that make sense? And that's what you have to help that client. They've got to feel this and see this so they can let go of that. No, history forgotten is sometimes repeated. It's not that we can make that go away anyway unless we do some kind of really special brain surgery. Don't forget that brain that never forgets. But we help that person realign their relationship with that past. We help this person also then, that current, the now energy, the 3s and 4s, how they change that energy in a way that as they begin a new way to look at, think about, feel about, you, that kind of stuff, all of a sudden, the negative reinforcement, the getting away from this, is no longer worth it. No, it's not worth it anymore. And when this becomes no longer worth it, change will happen. See what I'm saying with that? That's the power of that, you guys. Yes?
Okay, 2 thoughts. The first one is with the past and the present. I've known a variety of people who constantly reinforce the present being the past. One method is negative self-talk, and they've been carrying that with them ever since the beginning of that past.
Right.
Is Albert Ellis's ABC model one of the most effective ways of helping to get somebody through that?
You know what?
And I'm not trying to turn this into clinical class.
No, but the thing is this. Albert Ellis, Michael Beck, there's a lot of
KET.
There are 25 different ways to say R-E-T, R-E-B-T, B-T, R-E-T, R-E-T, B-T, 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 R-E-T, and all that. Cognitive restructuring, counseling, therapy. And what is it? Once again, it's how to render this in a way that a person enjoys a new cognitive negotiation with their reality.
So it's more a matter of finding a hole in their method to be able to hopefully help point that out to them so that they start seeing it
They-
themselves.
as they start to see
Preferably
that.
through active listening.
And that's what we're gonna see next semester when we get into that specific model with that.
Okay.
And again, that ABC, as we put it on the board, which did evoke a lot of interesting discussion. You guys really got onto that. And that's the basic framework. That's like the cornerstone, what becomes the foundation, which becomes the new cognitive house for that individual.
The second thing I had was just, as we're talking about the now, I'm constantly reminded of Eckhart Tolle. And I think you're familiar with him, philosopher, and so on. He's got, I think it was The Power of Now was his book.
Right, right.
If you get the audio book, he's boring as fuck. But if you listen, the message is there, just as much as it is with reading, but it helps to get a perspective on that now.
Well,
Thank you.
And that's the point of that. That's the point of that, you guys. We have to make this a situation where that client has a new way to relate to their now. First of all, history forgotten is often repeated. Besides that, we can't make that go away anyway. Short of brain surgery. So we teach that person a new way to relate to that past. We teach that person, hey, what did we talk about? Another thing, I'll tell you, sneak stuff from last semester in here. Another mistake that counselors often make with ones and twos is, well, you got to forgive that person. And until you forgive that person, you're never going to be okay. Maybe they can't. And I just set them up for failure, didn't I? So what do I talk about? What was that term I used last semester? Existential forgiveness. Forgive the fact that it happened. That kind of a thing. And then realign that relationship with that past. That kind of stuff like that, guys. But that is leaping forward a little bit.
That's pretty much what my therapist said to tell me. I mean, after I learned how to trust her, after I learned how to know that she was using her educational thing and it wasn't personal toward me with her discussion. She did the ABC.
Right.
About the childhood trauma that I dealt with when I was 10.
Right.
And it led up to 11, 12, 13, 14, until 40 years old. And then I finally came to see her and she was able to give me some instructions on how. And then with my faith came into play. And another faith came through him who hurt me. And so then the faith is telling me to forgive those who spitefully used you and hurt you. So I had to forgive him. I didn't have to forget, but I had to forgive.
Well, that's it. And sometimes a person can't. Even that far later on, they still can't.
Right.
And you must forgive or else. Well, why do that to a client? So what do I talk about? Not necessarily forgiving him or her, them, they, but forgive the fact that it happened.
Right.
And then and again, it's not let it go. That's another, let it go. Just let it go. That is such an insulting, shallow, stupid thing for a counselor to say to a client. Let it go. That'd be like the client, then they pick up a big stick, whack the counselor in the head and say, now you let that go.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's so stupid to say that to a client. It's not let it go, but we're going to help that client realign their relationship with that past reality. That's what that's all about. Gang, as we continue with that, everything we're talking about with that has to do with what we're talking about right now, this brain. This is where all that stuff is happening. And again, we have belabored a discussion about understanding that phylogenetic brain. Remember, guys, if we were to summarize some of the things we talked about, we could. And again, very artificially, and divide this brain into 3 levels. What was that? That first level. The oldest part of our brain, that brain that's still exactly the same now as it is with all the other animals, that reptilian brain, that react to the environment brain. That's where, gang, this is where most of what keeps us alive is living. If we can figure out a way to section the top of that brain off, right about here probably. Without that patient bleeding to death or going to shock, they could survive. Their body would still be able to survive. They wouldn't have a whole lot of fun. They wouldn't give a shit what's on TV tonight, but they could survive. This is the fight or flight part of the brain. This is the autonomic nervous system part of the brain. This is that part of the brain that started to learn about that world a long time ago, when all that mattered was right now. Not when you save for a rainy day. No, all that matters is right now. Right now, I either survive this current tiger attack or I don't. And if I don't, nothing else matters anyway. I'm Tiger Lunch. Tomorrow I'm Tiger Shet. Does that make sense? That kind of a thing like that. I use the story. I've got my big bundle of sticks there. That's all that's left. I need that fire tonight. I need it tomorrow too, by the way. And I'm on that ledge. And that big hungry tiger's waiting for me. And finally, and going back that way, there's nothing there. I'll sit there and starve to death. I can't eat my sticks. I got to get back. And that tiger is not going to budge. And finally, I throw all my sticks at the tiger, and they careen down into the valley and all that stuff. The tiger runs off. And then somebody goes, well, nice work, Celts. Well, now how do you like that? You threw away all your damn sticks. You never plan ahead. You never think about, what are you going to do tomorrow now? Well, what to that brain, right? What do we call that today? Immediate gratification. And that kind of a thing. Gang, if I had to throw those sticks at that tiger, tomorrow wouldn't have mattered anyway. I'm going to either fall off the ledge, starve to death on the ledge, or become Tiger Lunch. That brain doesn't give a shit about tomorrow. It doesn't. It's the same thing with that person. That's why, gang, when we do sometimes, when we get into a heated disagreement, discussion, argument with somebody, and again, sometimes in this modern experience, they can start with the damnedest thing. Where would you like to go for dinner tonight, honey? And the next thing you know, and that kind of a thing like that. And we've all done it. We've all experienced it. We've all seen it. And again, that person, in order to win that argument, they're saying the meanest, the damnedest things. They're doing this and doing that. They're going to win this argument right now, but they lost the relationship. They're going to win this argument of what happened to dinner tonight now anyway, or whatever. And then you want to say to them, why didn't you think about what this was going to cost you before you did that? Why didn't they? Because their brain didn't give a shit. All that brain. Once we take a modern human problem, whether it's interacting with somebody else or whatever else it may be, by the way we think about it. If we think that modern human problem into one of those good old-fashioned tiger attacks, oh, I can't believe that you disagreed with me again. I'll tell you, it's no matter what I say, you're going to disagree because you're just trying to keep me down, put me down, and all that kind of stuff. And then, oh, this is so bad. Oh, this is so awful. Oh, I can't stand. At some point, that old brain hears that and says, well, that sounds like a tiger to me. Don't you worry, though. I'm here for you. Let's kick in fight or flight. Let's go. When that fight or flight kicks in, well, thinking shuts down. When that fight or flight kicks in, nothing else matters right then and there anyway. When that person, again, that person, and they've been trying to slow down on their drinking. They've been trying to this and that. They've been, even considering going to a meeting or whatever else, and then they're punched in the face with some big problem. Not a tiger attack, but a pain. Life can be a pain in the ass. Life can be a frustration. Of this or that. And they think that problem into a tiger attack, and the next thing you know, they're off drinking. Why didn't you think about tomorrow? Why didn't you think about how I'm going to have my feelings hurt because you promised me you weren't going to drink anymore, but you did anyway? That means you don't love me. That has nothing to do with who that person loves or anything else. Once that brain turns that into a tiger, nothing matters but that tiger attack. Does that make sense?
So, for the people who are better at not reacting impulsively, would you say they've got a better or a stronger modern forebrain?
That would be wonderful to make it that simple.
Okay.
What's going to be one of the most powerful? This is why we got to go to the past. What's going to be one of the most powerful influences on this brain's today tiger making propensities? The past. What it's learned about that past. Those conditioned stimuli. Again, gang, there's something out there right now that could take every person in this room. I don't care what mood you're in right now, but there's something out there that just that split second you encounter that, your mood changes. That person will tell you. They've got 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years of recovery. They'll still tell you to this very day, the right thing happened the right way. I'm back to that last, you see what I'm saying? That's how powerful. And so all it takes is Just a little classical conditioning, a little operant conditioning, a little this, a little that, and all of a sudden, that person. Now, yeah, and we're going to see here one thing. We talked about this. One of the major jobs of the frontal lobe is, in addition to, a higher intellectual thought, this is what makes us human thinkers more than the other animals. At least we think so. We don't know. Maybe one day we figure out how to talk to animals, we'll find out we're real dumb. And that porpoise knows a hell of a lot more than we do. Who knows? Yeah, the executive functions. Don't forget those executive functions. That ability to become aware of a situation and then aware of the steps you need to take to do what you need to do. Those executive functions. Part of those executive functions is sometimes, in order to do what I need to do, I need to know what don't do. I mean, I'm thirsty, and that's a nice looking container you got right there. One thing is my brain could say, to hell with you, whack you in the head, steal your container. My stop sign says, no, you can't do that. That's not the way it works no more. That's not the rules. That's not going to work. Well, let me think, what else? Well, I know I could walk over here and I could get another cup and go fill up my own cup with. You see what I'm saying with it? That stop sign, that frontal lobe, that inhibits those old brain impulses. Guys, don't forget, I mean, that's what I say, anybody can be a tough guy. Anybody can be a tough guy. Doesn't take a lot of intelligence at all. You're lucky enough to get the bigger stick faster. That's all it takes to be a tough guy. It's your ability to think it through, work it through, in a way that we can solve this problem in that different way. That frontal lobe stop sign. So, can a person's frontal lobe stop sign be loose, down?
Yeah.
Yes, it can. And all kinds of, maybe, unfortunately, that person had a congenital, they were born with a bad stop sign in the first place. Maybe. What else loosens up that stop sign? Knocks that stop sign. Hey, gang, I'll tell you one thing. You know, although so many people to this very day still think, well, alcohol really, I know it's a depressant to start with, but isn't it in the beginning? It's kind of a stimulant, isn't it? Why do they think that? Well, think about it again. How did we do that? Oh, I'd like to talk to her. I can't. Oh, I'd like to talk to her. I can't. Oh, I can't. Oh, I can't. Drink. Hey, baby. Let's dance. What is, well, that's kind of like it's, no. It just happens to be, though, what was the first thing that alcohol depressed? The stop sign. And if you knock over the depressor, what do you end up with? No more depressed. You see what I'm saying? And that kind of a thing. It's not that the alcohol is a stimulant. It just happens that the first thing it inhibited was the inhibitor. That kind of stuff like that, you guys. That stop sign. Yeah, drugs, alcohol can loosen that stop sign. It can knock it to pieces sometimes.
Which is why really nice people can be huge assholes when they're drunk.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. And that kind of a thing. And usually, if you see somebody and they're one way and then they start drinking and all of a sudden they go completely out of character, especially negative kind of way, the alcohol didn't make that happen. It just loosened it up, opened the gate. That stuff was already there.
So they were already kind
You
of
see what I'm
asshole,
saying?
but
You know
they
what? Drink. You know what? You're a fucking bitch and I never did like you. Guess what? That alcohol didn't make that. It was already there. My stop sign said don't say that. The alcohol knocked down the stop sign. Guess what I'm saying? That's what that stuff is, you guys.
But isn't there a middle ground?
Yeah, kind of like a little.
Right.
Yes, in a way, certainly. Certainly.
But isn't there a middle ground? You never talk to somebody that may have had a middle ground in between that. I want to do this. Man, look. But then, no.
And that's what that stop sign is
in the
helping
middle,
do.
that's that intellectual thinking saying, well,
But what if that stop sign loosens up? That's what I'm talking
I'm gonna sit up here and argue with Kelps about the grade that he gave me, and I'm very pissed off. But you see, I can forget. You know, I hope you forgive
But
me for
again-
the past. But that was something then. But I still remember.
And the
it.
point is,
And-
though, right now, is that stop sign that helps us not react in those
Not
ways.
reacted, right.
Yes, congenital. Yes, drugs and alcohol can loosen that up, knock it over. What else? How about ongoing stress? Stress. At some point, that stop sign falls over. And when that stop sign falls over, then how do we solve our stressors? Let's go kill us some tigers.
Right.
You see what I'm saying with that? Yes.
How do you, like, I mean, I guess that's our whole goal, like, how do you fortify the stop sign?
Well, that-
Like,
that-
not just by removal,
Oh,
No,
sorry.
that's where, that's the whole broad-based, big picture thing. Starting from, again, gang, one of the biggest problems with most of these treatment centers, they get funded for all these happy things, they buy all those expensive Hazelden books. Two things that they're not doing, two of the most important things to start with to help that stop sign. How about this? Physical reconditioning and nutrition. And then removing the stress. Helping this person learn how not to create, especially stress they don't need in the first place by the way they're thinking about it. And all that kind of a thing. All that stuff. And if that stop sign gets loosened up, then we are. Because, gang, I mean, bottom line, if it comes to it, to this very second right now, and every person in this room, if push came to shove and you were put into a situation where this is a dangerous, deadly thing. If something happens, when there comes a contest between old brain, new brain, which one's going to win every time?
Old brain.
Your old brain. I don't care what the hell you think your morals and anything else are. If it comes down to that, that fight or flight's going to kick in. If we make that fight or flight kick in unnecessarily because I'm just so upset, so mad. Oh, this is so unfair. Oh, this is so this and that. Oh, I can't stand this. That brain hears enough of that, and it says, okay, you know what, that sounds like a tiger. To hell with thinking about it, let's go kick ass. You see what I'm saying with that? That's what that is. Guys, that old brain that reacts to the environment. Remember it, say it that way. Yeah, we're real lucky that we had that because that's one of the major reasons why we're here today and not just a bunch of fossilized tiger shit that Martian archaeologists are looking at right now. Something like that, if you get that metaphor. Hey, guess what? That brain that never forgets, we still got that. Which is kind of nice because tigers still happen once in a while. But we move on to this next, once again, gang, very artificial, that next subdivision, that middle brain, that we often call, I mean, popular in the textbooks and things like that, it's often summarized as the limbic system, that limbic system. And very often that textbook the next thing they say is, the limbic system is the seat of emotion. And again, what a gross oversimplification that is. That limbic, besides that, gang, remember this. Emotion, what is emotion? Emotion is a relatively modern human invention. To that old brain, what is emotion? On, off, activate, arouse or not. Either you need to find food, make babies, or get away from a tiger. And if you're not doing that, take it easy. That's what emotion as we think about it today. All those words we have. Let's take a look at a dictionary. How many thousands of words maybe in that dictionary that have to do with describing how we feel? Don't forget, none of those things were there until what? Until we humans developed the capacity to talk about stuff. We humans invented all those words. Why? Well, way back, what was that basic motivation last semester? The need to, the want to, know, understand. As we invented words to help describe and help us understand what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling that. That helped us feel like we're understanding things a little bit better. Emotion, all those words and all those things we thought, that's a relatively modern human invention. So that old brain, it's either on or off activate or not, arouse or not. Either kick ass or take it easy. Does that make sense, you guys? And that. But this middle brain can help to modulate that old brain behavior. The world is changing. Remember, this part of the brain did start to think about things. I mean, think about it. One day, and I'm hauling this big old carcass back. Ah, shit, it's hot out. I still got lots to do. I still got to get nuts and berries. I got to get there. Not enough time in the day. And all that. And then all of a sudden there was a little bit of a little earthquake. And I noticed the rolly rocks coming down the hill. This is the part of the brain that said, wow, if I could figure out a way to put those rolly rocks underneath this damn stupid carcass, it would be a hell of a lot easier to get that home. I know, let's call that a wheel. That's the part of the brain that started to think about things and start to change things. What? Hopefully for our better, for our best interest, for our betterment. that kind of thing like that. As this part of the brain starts to think about and change that world, though, guess what? Every time we end up with a better way to do something, a better way to exist. We solve one of those old brain problems. The only problem is we create now a new brain problem. Like we said, another example of that. Yeah, I got to get this damn carcass back. I got to this, I got to that. And everything. I still got to find nuts and berries. And all of a sudden I notice, where in the hell did you get those nuts and berries? I've never seen nuts and berries like that before in my life. Where the hell did you get those nuts and berries? I need nuts and berries. Old brain, what? Whack you in the head, take your nuts and berries. Hey, great, the party's on tonight. What's wrong with that strategy, though? Ultimately, what's wrong with that? Well, that's mean. You were mean. What was really wrong with that strategy? Huh?
Now we're working together.
I don't know where she got the damn nuts and berries in the first place. And besides that, I'm not going to have any more time tomorrow to go get nuts and berries than I had today anyway. And so one day, just as I was about ready to whack her in the head for those nuts and berries, something said, stop, wait a minute, let's talk about it. Boy, did that solve a lot of wonderful problems for us in so many ways. But it created a new, big problem. What was that? Yesterday we're mortal enemies. It is a matter of, pretty dangerous, it's a matter of who gets the biggest stick fastest. But it was still, I didn't have to think a lot about that. Today, though, I got a whole new set of things to worry about. What? Your feelings. I got to worry about your damn feelings. And that, how do we get along? Do you guys realize how incredibly much brain power, true, real brain doing its job well, intelligence it takes not to kill each other every day? Do you realize how incredibly expensive it is for us not to? I mean, I've used this before. Anybody get mad at anybody since the last time we were together? Did you kill them? Did you just, somewhere in the back of that brain, did you just kill them? Yeah, kill that son of a bitch. They're just going to steal your food anyway. This is part of the brain. This
Kill them and put them out of my
misery. Can't be doing that. And then all that working together. Well, it's the middle part of that brain that started to create a new way to interact with this in a way that, once again, it allowed me, instead of react to the environment, that middle brain, we react with the environment. We started to work together. And then the new brain, which what? Again, thinking about and changing that environment. Gang, I'll give you one example of a major, and never forget this, gang, this brain. We love this political map of Brazil up here. Damn, I wish it were that simple. Every part of that brain is so incredibly, exquisitely interwired in a way that, what have we said? Hey, why is reflection and paraphrasing as a counselor such a good thing to do? Because, well, the client already heard what they said. No, they did not. The saying part of the brain is different from the hearing it part of the brain. That's why we paraphrase back, reflect back, and things like that. Gang, all these different parts of this brain, all the different ways that it's working together now. And when this part of the brain changes that world, only problem with those advantages comes disadvantages. Well, I'll give you another example. As we started to work together, ultimately I had a little more time on my hands. That's where one day I noticed a really pretty colored red rock on the ground, and I went into the cave, and I started making things on the wall. One of these days we're going to call this art, we'll call this the Smithsonian Institute. The aesthetic values. Hey, where do you see that again? In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the aesthetic values. Appreciating, again, whatever kind of art, visual, audio, whatever, that brain's ability to appreciate that is a whole different part of the brain. A whole different part of that brain system, appreciating the aesthetics of life. And it's a very complex thing. Art, music, or whatever. physical art, whatever it may be. That brain's ability to understand the metaphors, the analogies, the meanings of symbolic representation. Do you realize how complex that is? Appreciating aesthetics is such a complex thing, a very expensive thing, which is why art, music, appreciating aesthetics is what? A very good stress management thing. Don't forget, what did we say? Worrying about is a very, 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 very expensive thing to do. That's why when we worry about enough, we stop thinking about. Hey, when we're worried, when we're so worried, why do we stay awake at night when we're so worried? Anxiety-ridden. Because worried about stuff is very expensive. Guess what else is a very expensive thing to do? Falling asleep. Falling asleep takes enormous amounts of brain energy. And I know that sounds almost crazy. Don't forget, that brain is not dead when it's sleeping. That brain is a very, 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 very busy place to be when you're sound asleep. Anyway, it takes a lot of energy to fall asleep. Well, why don't you fall asleep under a lot of anxiety? Because your brain's already too busy worrying about stuff. You don't have time to fall asleep. That's why anxiety keeps you up. Dang, when you learn, and working with aesthetics in life, again, visual, audio, physical aesthetics, things like that. Understanding, feeling, appreciating that. If you let that brain get that busy appreciating aesthetics, guess what? It don't have all that time to worry about that much anymore. That's why art and aesthetics can be such a valuable stress management tool. Do you see what I'm saying with this, guys? Understanding this stuff. And so this middle brain, which we're going to look at more in depth here in just a second, which is what? Reacting with the environment in that new brain. Which is thinking about and changing that world, hopefully for the better, for the nicer, happier, safer, easier. I mean, that's another thing. Dang, why is it that we used to, way back in those good old days, Grandma is 29 years old, she's ready to kick the bucket. That's old. How come? Well, yeah, I mean, of course. We didn't have modern medicine and stuff like that. We didn't have modern nutrition. Maybe Grandma hadn't had a good dinner for a few days. But what's another major reason why 29, 30 was old age back then?
He works a lot.
We were working ourselves to death. That was a damn hard place to be. That kind of a thing. It made life better, nicer, easier, everything else here. But with every one of those solutions came a new problem. Problem is, when you think about a solution, the resulting problem is that thought about problem. And when you use react to, don't think about it, solutions for need to think about it problems, usually instead of solving the problem, you end up what? Creating more problems. Do you see what I'm saying with that? Gang, all that together. Is everybody cool with that? This phylogenetic bottom-up understanding, isn't it? I mean, again, one of the first propositions I started with. It's amazing. If we were to start that list of all those things we love to hate about people today, they're selfish, they're self-centered, they're immediate gratification, they don't care about anybody but themselves, they're quick to anger, they're dishonest, they're this, they, that, and everything else. Dang, if we were to start a list of everything that we, and again, all those things about people that we love to hate today, and if we love to hate them enough, that we may even end up giving that thing a label, like a personality disorder or something like that. If it gets real bad enough, we'll even give that person, what? A new place to live called prison. You see what I'm saying? All that stuff, you guys. Most of those things that we love to hate about people today are the very things that made it possible for us to be here today in the first place. Once again, today, you're lazy. You don't want to work for a living. You want life handed to you on a silver platter. You just want everything the easy way. You see how that's so wrong, and things like that. That brain that learned a long, long time ago, you guys, if you spend 2,700 calories for a piece of food worth 1,300 calories, and that's the way you go for very long, what are you going to end up? Dead. You're going to starve to death. That brain that learned a long time ago, quick, cheap, and easy is the way to go. You see what I'm saying with that? And all that other stuff. And so when we look at and try to understand our client. Why are they doing the things they're doing? And it is so damn easy to get so damn mad at our clients. First of all, they do things that are pretty bad. She rented her daughter to the dope guy. Remember that story? The second thing, especially for counselors that make it, and parents and best friends and spouses, and if you would just shut up and listen to me. Why won't you just shut up once in a while and just listen? And we get so mad at our clients because they seem so vested in not getting better. And that makes us so damn mad and frustrated. You do this, you do that, you do this. And that makes me so mad. My problem is, gang, our brains are the same as that client's brain. And when we end up turning our client into an attacking tiger via their resistance and everything else, well, just like everybody else's brain, what? Hey, fight or flight kicks in, thinking shuts down, and we're no longer now, this is no longer about how do I genuinely help you. It's how do I make sure you understand who's in charge here. Better fuck you. You see what I'm saying? That's the thing. You see what I'm saying? And it's not just counselor to client. It's parent to kids. It's kids to parents. It's partners to partners. You see what I'm saying with this? This dynamic. That's why. What was one of the first things I said to you guys? That very first day of class back in August. Hi, welcome to DAC. I'm Dan. Oh, by the way, you
Can't help somebody you're so damn mad at.
can't help somebody you're so damn mad at. And now, you see what I'm saying with that? Hey, let's take a break, get back, and we're now going to do a top, back down, basic functional anatomy of this. Okay, we have done a bottom up, understand modern human behavior by understanding where that brain came from, what it's about, and why it's doing what it's doing. Now we're going to go bottom or top, back down, basic functional anatomy of what this now new brain actually does look like and what it's doing. Does that make sense? And a basic functional anatomy of what this is about. And don't forget, gang, whatever it may be, allergens, toxins, stress, psychoactive substances, or anything else, injuries that interfere with this incredibly elaborate, exquisitely complex orchestra of events that take place with this brain all at the same time. I mean, do you guys realize how much of that brain is doing everything exquisitely just right now in a way that you can sit in that chair, not fall over, and while sitting there, you're listening, watching, seeing, hearing, writing, and everything else. Do you realize how much of that brain has to work together exquisitely well in this orchestra of events? And anything that interferes with that, when we get into the neuron, we're going to see that again. This exquisite orchestration of events that take place that allow this brain to allow us to do what we're doing. That kind of a thing like that. And so we're going to start bottom up, understanding old brain to understand modern human behavior. Now, top down, understand the basic functional anatomy of this brain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So let's go with this. And we have, gang, and I want to point out again, look, that kind of looks like a political map of Brazil. I wish it were even close to that simple. We have looked at this, frontal lobe county right here. And we've talked about what that does. But nothing that frontal lobe is doing can it do by itself. For one thing, if that old brain, which is still very busy right now, our autonomic system, if it's not working right, we're not breathing or heart beating, and then who would give a shit about what we're talking about anyway? All that working together. We've talked about this frontal lobe. I'm going to just real quick again. What is it? Number one. Well, the frontal lobe, higher intellectual functioning, cognitive functioning. That's the part of the brain that is usually identified as that part of the brain that allows us to step beyond 4F level survival into the world of modern human thinking. Does that make sense? Don't forget, for most of our, again, lectern, not a pulpit, let's not get all distracted with that. That's the part of the brain that allowed us to step beyond 4F. For most of human history, just like all the other animals, we were basically just 4F level survivors. What does it take every day just to stay alive and make babies? That's all it took. We stepped beyond that. And generally, that's what's considered. Number one. Number two, the executive functions. And again, those executive functions, frontal lobe, what is that? Basically, our ability to become aware of a need, a situation, a drive state. I'm hungry. All right, that's nice. Well, what the hell are you going to do about that? Well, I need to get up. Well, I need to this. Well, I need to that. Well, I need to... What do I do? What are the series of steps I need to do in order to resolve the fact that I'm hungry? Does that make sense? And that's the executive functions. What did we say? An individual with maybe impaired executive functions. They know they got to go to the bathroom. They know there's a special room right down the hall. That's where you do that. They can no longer assemble the set of steps necessary to do that. And what? They're soiling themselves where they sit. Hey, another good example of that is how the way we interact with what's going on in our life right now. People who are soiling themselves at slot machines. It happens all the time. They can't leave that. Well, we talked about that slot machine. Remember that classical conditioning? Ring a ring, I'm about ready to leave this, and then the next one goes ring a ding ding ding, and there I am slobbering like Pavlov's dog. Hey, that was classical conditioning. And then we also, how about operant conditioning? I'm about ready to leave this slot machine. And I know, you've been watching me for the last half hour, and the second I walk away from this machine, you're going to pull it one time and win $1 million. We talked about that. Well, gang, that intense and that stress and all of that energy focusing on, I got to win it, I got to win it, I got to win it. And pretty soon, those executive functions start to loosen up, and that person is soiling themselves at that slot machine. What else affected those executive functions? We talked about, hey, the idea, that idiot moron counselor that day that asked me that question. Why do those schizophrenia patients smell funny? And I sat there and I thought, what in the hell is wrong? You really work in mental health? You really work in a program that specializes working with schizophrenia? And you're asking that question? You idiot moron, you need a different job. And what was that? That's the executive functions. And what is that? That's schizophrenia, compromising those executive functions. It's not that this person is trying to smell funny. Their problem is they don't know how to not smell funny right now. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying with this, you guys? And that's what that's all about. Those executive functions. And then, don't forget, the third big thing with that frontal lobe is that stop sign, which is actually a kind of a part of the executive functions. And again, that frontal lobe stop sign to inhibit those old brain impulses. All that working together. And then, gang, we see this right here. This purple band right here. Right posterior to the frontal lobe, the motor band. And that's going to bring us to, well, what I talk about, write it down like this, the motor triad. The motor triad. When we talk about this, the motor cortex right here, that's going to play a major role. As a matter of fact, your psychology books, it's one of the most popular pictures they have in the biology chapter, the homunculus. Has anybody ever seen that? And what it is it exaggerates the parts of the body. What part of the body is most attended to by this motor band? And that's why you'll see that. They have that, almost like that caricature. They have big, giant mouth, lips. They got big, giant hands, but they got a very tiny center. Why? Well, because a whole bunch more of that motor band is going to be involved in mouth, hands, than gut, trunk, and things like that. You see what I'm saying? All that. But this is just one part of the motor system. Another major part of the motor system is what? Right here. The cerebellum. Often called the little brain. The cerebellum, that plays a major role in fine coordination. helping to attune all these motor things you're doing. I mean, you think about this for a minute. And with that autonomic system, before you take your first step, you're already busy motor stuff already, aren't you? Heart beating, diaphragm working, and all these other things, bowel moving, and all that other stuff, all kinds of stuff. And so helping to attune. Another very, very important part of the cerebellum is motor learning. Motor learning. Classical condition, motor-based classical conditioning happens with the cerebellum. Those kinds of things like that. You see what I'm saying with this, you guys?
So the cerebellum is up under the motor, memory, and learning?
Motor learning, motor memory, and fine coordination. Helping to put this all together. Integrating all that stuff. Right down here, that's cerebellum. And then, gang, the third part of the triad, well, I'm going to have to, take a look up here for a minute. I'm going to have to take, right here at this lateral fissure, I'm going to have to open this up and look inside. And it's called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia.
That's the motor control.
That's part of the motor triad. First is that motor band right there. First is this motor cortex. Second is the cerebellum. Third, then, we look inside the basal ganglia. And again, fine, gross, motor control, movement. And all of these three have to work together in order for us to do even the very simplest of things, let alone the complex stuff that we do every day. You're just sitting at that chair, not falling out of your chair, and doing what you're doing right now. Is this, again, this orchestration of all these things. The motor cortex, the cerebellum, and the basal ganglia working together. Now, let's cross-reference this for a minute to understand things. How about this? That basal ganglia is full of dopamine. Well, I thought dopamine was I thought that's what made us drug addicts. Well, guess what? This is an example. Yes, dopamine does play a role in that pleasure center. But this is an example of where neurotransmitters like dopamine, it's not all that simple either. Dopamine does lots of things. Not just light up because we smoked cocaine. Another thing that dopamine plays a major role in is the basal ganglia and that gross and fine motor control. What's often referred to as the pyramidal and extrapyramidal systems.
So wait, the pyramidal and extrapyramidal are in the basal ganglia?
The basal ganglia. Gang, that dopamine rich. It needs dopamine in order for it to do its job. Okay, dopamine. What else do we think of when we think of dopamine?
Schizophrenia.
And again, what do meds that help with schizophrenia, what do? They slow down dopamine. Well, yeah, when they work. Yeah, you're exactly right. And again, we have so far to go to really get the right meds for these things. We got a long ways to go with that one. You're absolutely right. Supposedly, they slow down dopamine. And when they slow down that dopamine in those schizophrenia parts of the brain, that patient then is going to benefit. Fewer, less severe hallucinations, delusions, bizarre thinking, and things like that. That's just honky-dory. That medicine. And we're going to see how it works when we get back and we're all here together, positive thinking. When we get, and we're going to see how, as we look at neurons talking to each other on the board. Yes?
Okay, now, I was reading some of this last night because I was talking to my wife. We believe that her mom may have Parkinson's.
Okay.
Shaking and
Right.
around. And I was going to that acetylcholine
Right.
act, whatever you called it, and it was saying that it's a neurotransmitter that controls muscle contraction.
Acetylcholine, yeah.
And then it also went back down here to the dopamine.
Yes.
Talking about it's a deficiency.
Right.
Of the dopamine linked to Parkinson's.
That's it. And I'm going to get to
So
that
you're
in just a
saying there's
second.
two different things that may be linked to Parkinson's.
That's all. This is how
It seems like
complex
they
this
don't
is.
know. They just need giving them medicine and saying, we don't think it's Parkinson's. It may be
Well,
Parkinson's.
I know, and that's amazing. Like I say, we got a long ways to go with these psychiatric meds. That's right.
Diagnosis.
But the thing is, and I'm going to get to that in just a second, because the thing is this, you guys, when we take the medicine that slows down the dopamine and the schizophrenia part of the brain, and that means that the patient is benefiting in terms of those serious symptoms. That's great. The only problem is that medicine doesn't just go to the schizophrenia parts of the brain. It's also slowing the dopamine down in the pleasure center, which is why we see that zombie-like demeanor, flat affect, and all that. It's also slowing the dopamine down in the basal ganglia. That's dopamine playing that critical role in that basal ganglia. And when that medicine, which is helping the patient with the schizophrenia symptoms, it's slowing that dopamine down in the basal ganglia, what do we see? All this. Remember when you looked at Etta? Remember when we watched? Did we watch Etta?
We watched Etta.
Yeah, remember? And they would pan down on her hands. What were her fingers doing? What this? What was that? That was tardive dyskinesia. In other words, when that medicine was helping for the schizophrenia symptoms, it was slowing down that dopamine in the basal ganglia, and now this person's having all of these, what we call extrapyramidal side effects. All that muscle twitching, facial, that, all that stuff.
I worked for about 10 years with individuals with intellectual disabilities, and a lot of them came from like the state institutions before they opened up like group homes.
Right.
And you would see tardive in a lot of
Yeah,
patients.
because all they would do is fill them up with
yeah.
antipsychotics.
Yep.
And then, as a matter of fact, what do they give those patients who are taking the antipsychotic drugs, who are now starting to have those extrapyramidal motor effects? They give them
Dopamine.
anti-Parkinsonian medicine. And what is anti-Parkinsonian medicine? Basically L-Dopa, which is a chemical precursor to dopamine. The only problem is
L-Dopa.
L-Dopa. And then what happens is they jack up the dopamine so that helps with the motor movements, but now it's exacerbating the very thing they were trying to make go away in the first place, the psychotic symptoms. What's another thing that patient may do? Especially, not only for the motor side effects, but especially for these mental side effects. They're not feeling the terror of schizophrenia anymore. They're not feeling anything anymore. And so what does that person do? They don't like those side effects, and so what do? Start to smoke dope. Marijuana. What does marijuana do? Jack out dopamine, which makes them feel better. The only problem is, now it's countering the effect of the medicine they took for the symptoms in the first place.
Does nicotine do that same thing?
Pardon me?
Does nicotine do the same thing?
Nicotine...
As far as dopamine is concerned, because
nicotine,
you see a lot of patients who are mentally ill, like chain
nicotine,
smoke.
and we're gonna get. Can I say that's a good question? But let's hold on that one until we get to the neurotransmitters.
That's cool.
Because, but the point I'm making right now is that how incredibly complex this is. So the motor cortex, the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, understanding. All of a sudden, we're talking about the motor triad. Now we're talking about schizophrenia. How this is interrelated. Everything interrelated with that. All this stuff coming together. Does that make sense with this, you guys? We have right next to the motor cortex, the somatosensory cortex. Once again, you can look at that homunculus in your book, and it will caricature what parts of the body are going to be most attended to by that sensory cortex. That somatosensory cortex that also then starts to enjoin and play a role with the parietal lobe. Gang, think about this for a minute. Think about this for a minute. We're not just seeing something. We're seeing lots of things. And in addition to seeing stuff, we're hearing stuff, feeling stuff, smelling stuff, dizzy, daddy, all this stuff. All this is coming in all at the same time. Now remember what I said one time, if we wanted to really simplify this, what is this brain's job basically? To take in all this information. Again, we're not just seeing something, we're seeing lots of stuff, we're hearing lots of stuff, feeling lots of stuff, smelling lots of stuff, all this stuff together. All this information is coming in. Job, that person, get it in there. What's that second then? What we got right now is a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle thrown across the table. That brain's got to make sense out of this somehow or another. What the hell is this? Is this a tiger I got to get away from? Is this a nice piece of food I'd like to go get? Is this a, you see what I'm saying? Whatever. What is this? The parietal lobe helps play a major role in organizing all that information, all that sensory information, you know. Hey, time, space orientation, depth orientation, all this kind of stuff like that. It's putting all this stuff together. What is the situation here? Because again, don't forget, another part of that brain's job is all this stuff is coming in, and most of that stuff coming in isn't necessary anyway. The brain don't give a shit about that. Somehow or another, don't worry about what's going over there. I got to worry about right here. Here's where the tiger is. I got this one. That brain's ability. Remember what we said from the very start. One of the first things that brain needs to learn is not what to worry about. We already do that well. What we've got to start to learn is what don't worry about and how to worry about what we need to worry about. So all that's going on. And it's filtering out. Most of the stuff that's coming into your brain. Do you guys realize how many things are coming into your brain this very split second? If your brain had to give the same amount of mental awareness to every single thing coming into your brain right now, it couldn't do it. It would blow up. It would say, I quit. I'm done. I'm out of here. You're asking too much of me. Most of everything that's going into that brain right now, and every person's head in this room, is being filtered out. I don't forget that. Pay attention to that lunatic up there talking about stuff instead. That kind of a thing like that. But the stuff that gets past those filters, it's still a big jumbled mess. The parietal lobe helps to put together the big picture. You see what I'm saying?
You said that the somatosensory part is part of that parietal lobe?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The association cortex, the putting this whole thing together so that we know what the deal really is. Because don't forget, the next step with what the brain takes it in, it puts it together, what's going on here, what's the last thing it needs to do then? Decide what's the next best right thing to do. You see what I'm saying? That kind of a thing. So all this association, all this putting together, all that sensory information, all that stuff, what's going on here? Question.
I was just wondering why it was singled out and named specifically if it's part of, does it have its own function as a part of the whole?
Yeah, because basically, you look at the whole thing is basically the association cortex.
Okay.
And yeah, the somatosensory cortex area, and then this helping, taking all that stuff in, and assembling the big picture of whole.
So then my brain goes to Soma, the drug. Does that have anything to do with the way it, or is it just coincidence that it's named Soma?
That's
You know what I mean? Just
yeah.
Okay, because I didn't know if it like targeted specific parts of that brain.
No,
Or okay.
No, that's just the name. No,
Okay.
But it does have an impact on this.
Okay.
But that does have an impact on this.
Okay.
Because again, think about it this way. If that brain wasn't able to assemble this big picture, we don't know what's going on. We're going to become aware of the fact that we don't know what's going on, and that brain's going to say what? Oh shit, that's not a good place to be. Not knowing what's going on is not a good thing to have going on. Which is going to what? It's going to send it then back down to here. Let's worry about that a whole bunch. Which is going to interfere with the brain's ability to think about it and figure out what's going on. Which is why we start to feel so helplessly entangled in that anxiety. You ever notice when you're really, really under a lot of anxiety, the next thing, one of the things you experience is, I don't even know what the fuck anymore. You see what I'm saying? Why? Because that brain becomes so busy worrying about it, the energy's not there to do this. Does that make sense, you guys? You see what I'm saying with that? That's why drugs that slow down that worry about it feel so good to this part of the brain. It feels like I get to think more about it and a way to understand it. Does that make sense? Do you see what isn't this exquisite interaction of all these things working? Isn't this just exciting?
So when I say to myself, gosh, I'm overstimulated, like there's way too much going on, I'm overstimulated. That's the part of my brain that's being affected.
Maybe.
Because it's too
Or
much coming
maybe
in.
it's just feeling like too much going on. It's not overstimulated, except what you're overstimulating is worrying about and you thinking there's too much going on.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And once you start to worry about that, what happens? Kick in fight or flight. Now
Yeah.
you feel that energy.
Yes.
And now what do I do with this energy? Oh shit, I don't know what's going on, so I can't fix what's going on, so I gotta.
Yeah.
And at some point, fuck it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying with that, you guys? You see how all this works together? This is just exciting. This is just most exciting.
We ain't gonna
That'd
get
be the
to
part of the
it.
brain that turns down the radio when you're lost, right?
Yes, yes. Isn't that? Or when you're trying to find that exit sign in that busy traffic and you turn on the radio.
Yeah.
Yes,
On the
exactly.
phone.
Yes, exactly. Gang, from parietal lobe we have occipital lobe. What do we usually think of with occipital lobe? That's the part where we usually think about what?
Vision.
Vision. But this is another very important point here. Gang, I wish it were so simple. Nothing in this brain happens all by itself in place. This isn't where vision happens. It's not even really where vision begins. Actually, your retina is a part of your central nervous system. Vision begins there. It's set back then via the optic nerve. It crosses at the optic chiasm and then lands, and this is just one step in visual perception. A very important step. If this isn't here, we're going to have some serious problems. This is the first step in primary visual cortex. But you think about this for a minute. No matter what this is here, it's not going to mean much until you can think about it, remember about it, and put it into the whole big picture. You're not just seeing something. You're seeing lots of different things and hearing stuff and seeing and all this together. And so when we talk about the occipital lobe, that's where vision is. No, that's a step in visual perception. And then it's the same thing with the temporal lobe. This bluish area right here. What's the thing we think of usually when we say temporal lobe? Audio, hearing. But this isn't where hearing happens. It's a major step in the whole big complex process of hearing perception, audio perception. We notice something else that we need to look at real quick. This is one way to look at this brain. We could also look at it like this, couldn't we? We got a left and a right. We have a left and a right temporal lobe. We have these two, what do they call them? Hemispheres. Those two hemispheres, which are connected by these, somebody help me, what is this?
Corpus
The
callosum.
corpus callosum.
Oh,
Dang.
Maria.
Psychology back in the late 60s and early 70s went wild with this hemisphere thing. This is where, hey, who in here right now, who's a right brainer? Who are the right brainers?
Hold on, I never remember which one's which.
Who enjoys the
Aesthetics,
bigger
art, higher
metaphorical?
mathematics.
We're all,
Oh, that's totally me.
Who enjoys
We're both,
art?
though.
Who would rather spend their day at the Smithsonian than in the library? Who would rather? You see, who are the musicians?
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's not.
Who are the
I wanna be
artists?
all of them.
That's not.
Stick with me. Who are the musicians, the artists, and things like that? That right brain. Hey, who in here is a left brainer? You ever been told?
The analytical pain in the
Yeah,
Yes.
think too much. You are overanalyzing everything. You know what your problem is? You always overanalyze everything. That's what your problem is. You think, maybe, and that.
I know.
Who loves math?
no.
Who needs to understand? You see what I'm saying? And gang, here's the thing. Here's the thing. We got all excited about it. We started to talk about this. In your book, it talks about split brain research and stuff like that. Read that stuff. Gang, that right brainers, left brainers, as if these two things lived independently of each other. Psychotherapy even jumped on that bandwagon. We called it neuro-linguistic programming. Where? Here's how it worked. The idea of neuro-linguistic programming. Psychotherapy jumped on that right brain, left brain bandwagon. It went something like this. You know, in therapy and in counseling, sometimes the patient needs to hear things they don't want to hear. And one of the reasons for all this resistance and things is because, well, who wants to hear what they don't want to hear? And, well, I'll tell you what's going on here. that left brain is analyzing the hell out of that message and trying to pick it to pieces so it doesn't have to hear it. And that's why clients aren't benefiting from that therapy. Because they're not letting themselves hear it, because their left brain is analyzing the shit out of it and picking it to pieces. I know then, how about in therapy, let's stop talking to the left brain, let's start talking to the right brain. And out of that are hypnosis, the use of metaphor, analogy, telling the big, hey, Aesop's fables, what is that? That's just a sneaky way back, what? Telling the right brain about stuff so that it doesn't get picked to pieces by the left brain. And so a whole movement in psychotherapy, and again it became known as neuro-linguistic programming. Hypnosis again, metaphor, analogy, telling stories.
Doesn't that make sense though? Like if you encounter someone who enjoys arts or storytelling,
Sure.
to use that to your advantage to help
Besides that,
them.
we just talked about art and said how art's such a...
Yeah,
But the thing is this. It was just, I wish it were that simple.
right,
You got to remember something, gang. Nobody's a right brainer, left brainer. Everybody's an all brainer.
right.
I mean, the greatest musician in the world had better know how to count.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And things like that. The greatest mathematician in the world. Think about this for a minute. Think about this for a minute. The greatest mathematician in the world. They get the greatest formula in the world. If they don't know how to make that work some way in a bigger picture, it goes nowhere. Everything is both brain. And so, you know, when we think of the temporal lobe, basically audio processing, but also it's going to play a big role in emotional memory. For most people on the left side, language. And think about, and gang, I mean, if you want to think visual perception is complex, language
I love words.
Changes the way you think.
is everything. You realize how many parts of that brain it takes to say, hear, understand? The whole idea of mental imagery, the whole idea of thinking in the past, the future, and everything. Language. And for most people on the left. Gang. Yeah, a lot of, especially emotional memory. With that audio. And you think about this, guys. Hearing stuff is a real provocative, fast track to what? Emotional memory. You hear something. I mean, think about this. You're driving down the road in a convertible that tops down on a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful spring day. You're in the greatest mood in the world. You're just going to enjoy this wonderful day. You turn on the radio and you happen to have the oldie station on. And the first song that comes on, within half a second and a half, you hear that song. And it was that song that they played all the time back in a different part of your life when things weren't going so well. A lot of sad memories back in it. And just like that, you'll go right back to that, at least for a little bit, won't you? The power of that. Guess what is usually often, and of course, always when people see that, here, how do you like my airplane?
I think your eye's a little high.
That's awesome.
The nose brain. The smell brain is tucked right under here, right with the temporal lobe and right with prefrontal into the limbic system. And for most people, the most emotional, evocative sense of them all is smell. And you know what is interesting with this smell brain? Here's an example of how the brain never forgets. I keep saying that, the brain never forgets. Guys, think about this for a minute. How incredibly complex is vision? How incredibly complex is hearing? Tactile. Smell. One neuronal synapse from stimulus to amygdala. One synapse. Just like that. Now, why would that be? And why is that an example of how the brain never forgets? Well, don't forget something, you guys. Long before we even had eyes, ears, Way back if we want to, again, like they're not a pulpit, back to that primordial pool. I'm just a pile of chemicals here. I better know when I'm getting too close to something that's not good for me. I don't even have eyes yet. I don't have ears. I don't have skin. I'm just a pile of chemicals. I better be those chemical senses. So wildly important for our survival. And that brain has never forgotten that. And that smells to this day, one synapse from stimulus to amygdala, which we're going to talk about here in just a second.
So, I just have a question. When they say, like, if you lose a sense, your others get better, they don't really get better as much as it is your brain has more time to focus on them?
Well, it attenuates more attention and ability to try and take advantage of the sense that's still left. Because what's that brain trying to do? Don't forget, what that brain's trying to do is get the big picture understanding. Well, that part of that big picture is no longer there. How do I attenuate and try and account for that? I got to fill in that space somehow or another. That's what confabulation is. When that brain in memory, because a whole bunch of how we understand the big picture now is going to depend on how we remember about it, right? Don't forget, what is that brain trying to do? Just get the big picture. What's going on here? Where's the food? Where's the mate? Where's the hungry tiger? What's the next best right thing to do here? That kind of a thing like that. Hey, a real important part of understanding the big picture now is remembering about that stuff from the past. And so, that's what confabulation is. When that person, because of, well, for example, Korsakoff's syndrome. What is that? Korsakoff is a severe, again, losing that memory. And that person's talking along, and all of a sudden they run into an empty space. Instead of stopping, what do? They just invent and keep rolling until they catch up with memory again. This whole piece. It's not that they're lying. It's not that they're fantasizing or hallucinating. It's not like it's a delusion. It's just that that brain did its best to fill in that blank space so it could continue. What's the big picture here? Does that make sense? And that's confabulation. Very, very serious dementia kind of a thing. And often with Korsakoff syndrome, where does that come from? Well, long-term, high alcohol use and its effect on that brain. Those kinds of things like that. This outer brain, how it's working together to understand the big picture. Does that make sense? Very cool? Questions, thoughts, anything with that? And then, gang, from top going back down, now let's open this up. And let's take a look at the middle. What did we say? That middle brain, that what? Reacts with the environment. The limbic system. There's a textbook picture of the limbic system. We're inside that now. And here's that outer core, the neocortex. We've opened that up. We're looking inside here now. And let's look at a few things. Well, number one, let's look at this thing right here called the hippocampus.
That's my favorite.
The hippocampus. Uh-huh.
That's my favorite part of the brain.
Why is that your favorite part?
I don't know, I just like it.
The hippocampus is the fun. What is it? Anybody, help me. What is that hippocampus? What is that all about? Anybody? Memory. Gang, read in your intro psych book, read the chapter on memory. Homework. Read that chapter on memory, and you're going to see memory is split into 3 major steps, isn't it? Number 1 step is sensory memory. Instantaneous, split-second, split bit. Very tight. In and out. And don't forget, I mean, your body, one way or another, visual, tactile, audio, becomes aware of a stimulus. And right there, that sensory level, instantaneous, very, very short, very tiny. And again, the first step is, do I need to worry about this anyway? No, forget it. No, forget that. Again, most of that stuff coming in, the body, the brain said, forget it. We don't worry about that. Forget that. If the brain, well, maybe we better think about this for a second. It goes to short-term memory. Short-term memory, what is that? Maybe 12, 14, 15 seconds if you're lucky. Maybe 9 to 12 bits of information or something. You know, that's why your telephone numbers, social security numbers, what? 309-555-3718. What is it? It helps to break that up. That's that short-term memory. So it can manage those bits of information and things like that. Short-term memory, often called our working memory. That's our day in and day out, our sense of awareness and what's going on memory. But if we really want to remember something, knowledge, we have to transfer that from short-term memory to long-term memory. And that process is executed in part via the hippocampus. Here's a little mnemonic or memory aid. Remember, hippocampus, helping to know stuff. It's kind of like, what are you doing? You're on campus. What do you want to do on campus is know stuff. Hippocampus. Damage to the hippocampus. The infamous story in psychology of HM, the patient. They were doing brain surgery. They were basically trying to do some brain surgery to help with a seizure problem. They accidentally clipped, damaged the hippocampus. That person, for the rest of their life, had about a 15-second future. In other words, they still knew their name, their phone number. They still knew who was the first person, where they lived, and everything else. But anything new coming in is going to last only as long as it stays in short-term memory, and then it's gone. It can't get transferred to long-term memory anymore. You're the patient. Hi, I'm Dan. We're here at the Neurological
Tom.
Institute.
From 10th.
My name's Dan. Hi, Dan. And I'm Steven. 15 seconds later, I'm a complete stranger.
It's Tom.
You see what I'm saying?
10-second Tom.
Because it can no longer transfer to that long-term memory. Now, wait a minute, Dan. I thought we were talking about emotion here. What the hell are you talking about memory for? Why is that such an important part of this limbic system? Well, you think about this for a minute, guys. You think about this real serious for a minute. One of the most important factors in how we feel about something now is based on how we remember about it. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, memory is a big part of this emotional processing. A major factor in how I feel about something now is going to be based on how I remember about it. You see what I'm saying with that? And so this memory. Another thing right here, the hypothalamus. Now the hypothalamus can actually be considered parts of several different structural organizational systems.
Mine's broken.
Pardon me?
Mine's broken.
Yours is broken?
Yeah. Because I never, I eat when I'm not hungry. It's broken.
The hypothalamus is often called what? The body's thermostat. The body's thermostat. The hypothalamus, the body's thermostat. It plays a major... Guys, you remember when we said job number one of the brain was what? Make sure the body's behaving itself biologically? All those things it's got to do. Before you have one thought or emotion or take one step forward, that body's already busy just keeping itself alive. All the things it needs to do just to stay alive. Heart rate, respiration, everything it's doing just to stay alive. Job number one. What was job number two, just to remember? Was guide the behaviors that help with job number one. The hypothalamus plays a major role in job number one. Plays a major role in keeping an eye on all those different parts of the body, what's going on, and what needs to happen next. Plays a role in what, as you just, hunger motivation, motivation in general, and all the, hypothalamus plays a major role in emotional motivation and things. In other words, propelling. When to do what that you need to do right now, not to feel happy, nothing, to just stay alive. As a matter of fact, the hypothalamus, as you'll see in this picture, which sits on top of the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland, which is known as the master gland of the
Hormones.
endocrine system. All those ways that brain stays chemically attuned to and in charge of the rest of that body. Exactly. That pituitary gland. So we go hypothalamus to pituitary gland, endocrine system. How? I mean, all this stuff has to be happening just right all the time. This exquisitely tuned orchestration of, and I'm not talking about psychological stuff, I'm just talking about how that damn body's going to stay alive. Just stuff's going to do just otherwise, kind of thing like that. The hypothalamus plays a role in motivation. The hypothalamus is going to play a major role in the fight or flight response. When to send what message to what part of the body. You know what? Forget about thinking right now. Forget about this. Forget about that. Right now, what we got to do is go kick some ass. You see what I'm saying with that? That kind of a thing like that.
You say that we have to go kick some ass, but aren't there two thought processes really with fight or flight? We got to go kick some ass, or we need to run.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Fight or flight.
Gotcha.
As a matter of
He
fact,
sounds
the
so
two
much
which is
more like a
safest.
badass.
He does sound like he does.
He's
Like
so
we're gonna
much more
fight.
of a
We're gonna
badass
fight.
when he's just ready to fight people.
What of the two, which is the safest?
Running.
Getting out of there.
Yeah.
Today you're a chicken shit. Today you got no guts. Today you got no that brain. A long time. You know what? Today you're procrastinating. Today you're always trying to avoid. That brain learned a long time ago. I mean, I don't care if you're the toughest, biggest, toughest one on the block. All it's going to take is just as you're out ready to swing that stick, slip on a rock, and you're bumping your head. Guess what? You are now. I don't care how tough you thought you were. You're Tiger Lunch. The best thing is to get the hell, either avoid in the first place or get the hell out of there in the second place.
Devo.
In the long run, that's the safest thing to do. Today you're just a big pansy. You're ticking. You're this or that. No, I'll tell you what. Again, all those things we love to hate about, no, that's survival. Speaking of which, the amygdala. The amygdala. Often it's thought of as rage memory. The amygdala, rage memory. Which, well, that kind of sounds also rage. Who wants to remember rage? Rage is bad. I don't want you to rage. That's your problem. You rage too much. Remember, gang, to that old brain, what is an emotion? On, off, up, or down. Arouse or not. Rage is that. Rage means you got a problem here, go do something about it. We have taken that idea and turned it to that negative, oh, you're raging. Rage to that old brain is just, yeah, there's something here that we got to deal with.
For a dance party.
Let's get going.
That's a rave.
That amygdala. What did I say a minute ago? That nose. One synapse from smell to the amygdala. That information comes in. And it goes right to the amygdala. And that amygdala, that's got to make that split second right now decision. Is this a tiger or not? If it's a tiger, the next step is to hell with everything else, shut down everything. Hey, hypothalamus, help us kick in fight or flight. That's all that matters right now. Now, what if the amygdala decides, that's not such a big deal after all? Then, the thalamus, and from thalamus to the other parts of that neocortex, that will be involved in the next best right thing to do. Does that make sense? See, all this is flowing together. That amygdala. Also, now we already talked about that frontal lobe stop sign. That at that higher level inhibits old brain impulses. The amygdala happens first. This amygdala got no time to worry about that damn stop sign. This is a tiger, and every split second counts if you're going to stay alive. The problem is that amygdala, what if there's something wrong with that amygdala? Again, a congenital disorder, a disease, an injury, drugs, alcohol, or something. Another thing with that amygdala is it remembers tigers. Or it does its best to remember a tiger. And the next thing you know, something's happening, and that amygdala is remembering about it. But all of a sudden, what it's remembering is off just enough that it's deciding something that's not a tiger is a tiger. And we're kicking in fight or flight to non-tiger issues. Do you see what I'm saying with that? And all of a sudden, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. And we're blowing up and hollering and screaming, and there goes the phone, and there goes and everything else. You see what I'm saying with this stuff, you guys? I love to relate to the nonverbal relate to. But the thing is this, you guys. So that amygdala can sometimes. Hey, it's that amygdala. Here it is. It's 11:30 at night, and you're in a strange city, and you're alone, and you're on the 4th floor of that apparently empty parking deck, and you can't remember where your car is anyway. And all of a sudden you notice there's somebody walking behind you, and every time you turn left, so do they, and every time you turn right, so do they. And all of a sudden your amygdala says, oh shit, what the hell we got going here? Now, that amygdala, the first thing it's going to do is find a big stick and whack them. That stop sign has to, hey amygdala, let's calm down a minute, let's think about this for a second.
Yeah, you whacked it.
But what if that amygdala
Right.
decides enough and says, forget you stop sign, I'm in charge here. And now, it just happens that that other person was also lost looking for their car. The next thing you know, they're sitting there with a head injury because you decided they were a tiger.
Maybe, or you're in the back of a white van tied up on the next, serial killer's list.
But you see what I'm saying with this?
Yeah.
A good example of this amygdala is called sham rage. Sham rage. And for you cat lovers, this isn't a great
Right.
story. But let's take a cat and let's damage that amygdala on purpose.
Don't do it.
And what we'll see is that cat will be laying there completely oblivious to everything and docile, completely oblivious and docile to everything. And then how about just a feather? And just barely touch that cat with that feather. And that cat will just go wild with undirected, wild, lashing out rage. And the minute you remove that stimulus, it goes back down. You see what I'm saying? What? That amygdala is damaged. Do you see this amygdala stop sign relationship? Amygdala first step. Hey, let's go kick ass or escape. But sometimes if that amygdala has decided to overreact, well, hopefully that stops. Hey, amygdala, let's calm down. Maybe we need to think about this a little bit more yet. But what if that amygdala fires strong enough, hard enough, and it bypasses that stop sign, and now we're making a big damn ass fool of ourselves. Getting pissed off and mad, and there goes the phone again, against the wall, and all this other stuff. Reacting to something we didn't need to react to. Does that make sense? So that amygdala. Now, gang, with this in mind and what we just talked about,
I missed what the thalamus does.
Thalamus is the relay state. Amygdala. You know what? Maybe this isn't a tiger. Maybe we need to think about it.
Okay.
To the thalamus. From the thalamus, that second relay station, then from thalamus to the other parts of the neocortex, which will then help us better understand this so that we can decide what is the next best right thing to do. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sends it up to the parts of the brain now that are, what is really going on here? What really is the next best right thing to do?
Think of it as your Wi-Fi router.
I have the definition of the thalamus, if you'd like to
Big
copy
signals
it.
coming in
Blair.
from the internet.
Don't forget, you guys, don't forget something. This is all about that brain, taking in the information, trying to make sense out of it, trying to decide what's the next best right thing to do. Period. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, that Wi-Fi analogy I just heard, that would be a good metaphor for that. What other part of the brain now needs to get going to help us understand what's the deal so that we can decide what's the next best right thing to do?
And that's after the amygdala decides it's not a tiger?
Right,
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
If that amygdala decides tiger, to hell with thinking about anything.
Okay.
It's time to kick in fight or flight. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? Do you guys see how, where, and why drugs are going to start to have a very big and often deleterious impact on that brain's ability to know and do what's the next best right thing to do?
Yes.
And why all of a sudden that brain's doing some really stupid things thinking it's the next best right thing to do?
Yeah.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? The hand.
Yeah, I just want to share some alliterations that help me to remember some things, like hypothalamus. I think of monitoring homeostasis, hypothalamus, homeostasis. Also, I like to think of motor cortex as movement, which means muscles. So those kind of, motor, movement, motor, muscles, those kind of associations might help you remember those things.
Whatever mnemonics work with that. And just keep in mind then, gang, everything we're talking about right now, you take in the information, sensory, that brain then's got to put together what's the big, in other words, it's got to take all those puzzle parts and put it together as quickly as possible so it knows now what's the next best right thing to do. Imagine what that jigsaw puzzle is, it turns out, is just one big giant arrow. And once that brain assembles that big puzzle, it says go this way. That's the next best right thing to do. Does that make sense? Gang, to illustrate how wildly interconnected this limbic system is, and its profound effect on modulating that old brain behavior. Take a look at this. You're going to feel compelled to write down every word on this list. I'm going to invite you right now to don't do that. Sit back. Let's just consider this for a minute.
Ooh.
Just some different parts of this limbic system.
This is exciting. This is exciting.
You know what you can do? You can come up right after class and take a picture of this. Put your pencil down. Let's just sit back and enjoy this story.
Learn some new shit.
These are different parts of this limbic system. We identified the big picture parts, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the amygdala. These are other parts of all that. The anterior cingulate. And take a look at this for a minute, you guys. Look at what this is involved in. Empathy. Do you realize how incredibly complex empathy is? That real, true ability to truly understand somebody else's emotional experience right now? Do you realize how complex that is? Do you realize also that how complex that is, and at the same time, that brain doesn't want to give a shit? I mean, here I'm sitting here, and I notice a tiger coming at me. Do I really got time to worry about what the tiger's fucking worried about right now? In the first place? You see what I'm saying? Empathy is it's a real difficult thing to do. It's going to take a lot of brain power with that stuff. Hey gang, sociopathy, antisocial personality disorder, things like that. What's one of the major things we see with that? That lack of empathy, that inability to be able to understand how what I'm doing right now is affecting you. I told you, put that down anyway. You see what I'm saying?
So, but how can a brain structure affect learned behavior? Because aren't personality disorders, I mean, I guess there's overlap to all of it, so I guess I'll shut up, but.
Every part of this brain, listen,
But.
listen, every part of this brain is also liable to the impact and the modulation of experience, learning. Affect. What is affect? Well, that's our fancy way of saying emotion. In psychology, we don't say emotion because we're special. We say affect. You know why we say affect? Because we're psychologists and you're not. So I get to I know words you don't know. You know why? Because I'm a psychologist. You're not a psychologist. It's emotion. Understanding that emotion. Decision making. Cognitive evaluation of the situation. Once again, like, okay, here's what it is. What does it mean? Don't forget, this is all 3 steps. Take it in, put it together. What's the next best right thing to do? Impulse control. Regulation of emotional states. Monitoring behavior for mistakes. Learning from mistakes. Some pretty important stuff just right here, isn't it? You see what I'm saying with all this? Look at all that stuff. You see how this is going to play a role in my ability to not kill you. You see what I'm saying with that? All that stuff working together.
Orbital.
Learning from rewards and punishment. Boy, that started to sound kind of like what did we talk about last semester? Operant conditioning. Decision making that involves sensitivity to risk. Do you know that person? They just do the damnedest risky things for no good reason. That person who will play with the train. They will run back and forth across the tracks as the train is coming to see how many times they can do that before they get whacked by the train. People who do the damnedest, silliest, risky things. Driving a car or something like that. And you say, what is that brain? They're doing those damn silly things. Now, sometimes there could be a motivation for that. Hey, pay attention to me. Hey, am I going to impress you by doing this crazy?
I was just going to ask you, are they aware that they're doing that?
But sometimes not. And again, it's just that compulsion. How many times can I run back and forth across that track before the train gets here? Those kinds of, you see what I'm saying with that?
So then, like, if you're manic, is that
Yes, left
affecting
brain.
your orbitofrontal cortex?
It's going to have a role with that kind of stuff. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, yeah, that would be
Behavioral
why.
flexibility.
Because
Yeah.
they're so
Impulse
impulsive
control,
and all
once again.
risky and all that.
Emotional, social decision making. What is getting more and more complex, isn't it? Getting more and more complex. How about this?
That's all in that middle brain.
Complex,
This is
but
all
it makes
that middle brain.
sense.
Yeah.
It's all this limbic
It
system.
all comes together in one.
How about this?
Brain.
Some more stuff. Emotional response to body states, pain perception, experience of anger, fear, empathy, disgust. A big thing here. Recognition of violation of social norms. Do you know this person? They just seem to get so damn mad, so damn fast when somebody else violates what they think is the way it's supposed to be. It's not even that big a deal, maybe. They just such just little tolerance for any aberration of what is. You're supposed to. Again, it's not what you said; it's how you said it, or whatever else. Do you know that they get so damn mad, so damn fast, and they won't let it? And you see what I'm saying? At some point, that brain will say, "You know what? I mean, really, are we going to ruin the rest of the night over this? Really, is that what we want to do?" But what if that's not working well? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know that person? They just won't let it go. They just won't let it go. They will rip and tear at that, whatever it is, the silliest, stupid, until it's finally done, and now the whole night is ruined, the whole this and that. You know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
At some point, wouldn't that brain say, really? Is this really worth the rest of the night? Is this really worth that relationship? Is this really, you see what I'm saying with that? But what if there's something there that's not letting that brain do that? All this stuff that this limbic system, all these things, all these different parts, all working in this exquisite concert of regulating.
They hate stupid people and everyone's fucking stupid.
Emotional memory, emotional processing,
That's stupid, Blair.
I want.
I'm just kidding.
integration of perception and emotional social processing. All this stuff, you guys. Look at all this stuff that's going on with that. That middle brain helping us react with. And especially what we see here, because think about this, you guys, once again. We talk about stress management. Well, we talk about stress, losing stop signs, stress this, stress that, and everything else. What's the number one, biggest, most usually severe, inescapable, you ain't going to get away from it, stress every person every day has to deal with?
Me.
Driving?
Other people.
Oh,
I sound like myself.
Driving with other people.
Driving with other people. You see what I'm saying with this?
Driving.
Every day. Do you know how hard it is for that brain not to just start whacking people in the head?
very hard.
Its ability to start, if there's a different way, we got to figure out a different way here. This is a thinking problem, we got to think about it. We can't just whack people in the head problem. You see what I'm saying with this? How incredibly, it's just stuff exciting, you guys. It's seriously, this is the greatest stuff in the world.
So are these structures or are they regions?
These are different parts of it.
Okay.
Different structures, parts of that limbic system.
So we can cut out someone's insula?
Yeah,
Nice.
in those areas.
Jesus. I thought I knew you, man.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out,
Yeah,
like, how did
got
they
it.
know the anterior cingulate
Look.
did empathy? Did they cut out somebody's anterior cingulate and all of a sudden they were...
And again, you gotta remember something. What's another thing I said when we started this whole brain thing?
All this shit works together?
Everything works together, but what was another thing I said? We are still kind of like Orville and Wilbur when they were little
Comes to
kids
the
on the
brain.
back porch watching the birds and the butterflies, wondering how and why.
Mm-hmm.
What did I say? You know what?
Dark ages.
Everything I'm saying to you today,
Could be different.
by the
next
time we
week.
get back from break, I may have to say, guess what? I've got news for you.
We
Just found out I was wrong.
Mhm.
One of the damnedest thing about this brain stuff is every time we learn one new thing about the brain, we often also learn there were a couple things we thought we knew about the brain. Turns out it wasn't right after all.
Every time we solve a problem, we fuck up something else.
Mhm.
That's
With the
exhausting.
brain, I think with the perception of certain things that as we was younger and we didn't have the cares of the world, but I never did think about how it was wrong for me to drive without a driver's license. I didn't think that was some type of right or some type of privilege or something.
Right,
I
right.
thought I was a right. I got the car, I'm driving it. I'm putting gas in, I'm driving it. So, but now I'm at an age that I'm doing social norm. I'm doing what the law says.
Well, and
But
that,
then every one of my grandkids is riding around on suspended licenses,
Right.
and then they just jumping in and out of the car. Don't come over here, because I don't need them following you over here. You
yeah,
know
one
what
of
I'm
the
saying?
biggest things to remember. All this stuff together, and we often, what is it? You gotta be 18 to this and that, you gotta be 21 to that and this. That brain's true, real ability to understand implications of behavior and choices and decisions really isn't fully well integrated until around 24 or 25.
And then males can be later.
So when we give that kid that driver's license and that this and that ability to buy liquor and that this and that and everything else at age 18, 21 and things like that,
That's ignorant.
you wonder why the insurance companies hated 16-year-olds. We're giving 16-year-olds, 4,000 pound killing machine.
Well, isn't that too, like, why if you look at, like, right now, the here and now, you will see reports of younger people under the age of 25, 18 to 25, taking advantage of the lower airline rates because they're going to visit wherever they want to go. They don't feel like there's a risk.
Well, and besides that,
I mean-
there's another part of that. What did we call that last semester with Piaget? The Who remembers? Come on, everybody.
It's one of the stages.
Boy, I love to sneak stuff in there,
Concrete.
don't I?
Concrete.
No.
And it was called the. Dun, 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 dun.
Don't.
That doesn't fucking
The
help.
personal fable.
How personal fable.
The personal fable.
Yeah.
The.
Timer doesn't help.
It won't happen to me.
Right.
That inability
Right.
Yeah,
to
that's-
believe
That's
that
why I
that
hear,
bad
that's
outcome.
why I hear a lot from all of them.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna happen to me, I ain't got no insurance.
I'm
Ain't gonna happen
smarter
to me.
than, I'm better than.
asking police.
Yeah.
I ain't got no license.
And then
but
you
I'm
grow
still
up and you're like
driving.
Maria, and it's all gonna happen.
That's what that is. Gang, hey, did you notice I stuck in something? Don't forget. Always, gang. Don't forget, everything we ever talk about every day here is important. Never forget anything.
You do the clock thing, and I think of the clock melting every time. So
The who?
the clock melting.
Illusions.
That's
Oh,
that's where my head goes to that illusion.
That's an illusion.
Illusion.
That would be an illusion or something.
Yeah.
Gang, we're not done here. We still got a ways to go, and then we're gonna look at neurons talking to each other. I hope we'll be
That's
doing it
exciting.
this
That's
way.
exciting.
I sure hope. I guess we all have to wait and see what next. I hope that we'll be together in a week from this Tuesday.
Can we have rogue personal fable classrooms where like that shit won't happen to us and we can just get together at Starbucks and you can run around Starbucks like a crazy man.
Yeah, there we
We'll all
go.
Be like, yeah.
Yeah, we'll meet at the coffee shop at Barnes and Noble.
That's where I
Oh,
do
they'll
my
love us.
studying.
Yeah.
We could find something down there.
There you go. Hey gang, listen. Everything. Every day, look at this stuff. And the other direction we're going with the assessment. Every day, stay in touch. Now, as far as the other thing goes, is I've got everybody's number and stuff now, right? All that stuff. I'm gonna do my best. We'll see what happens. We'll see what the next thing is. I guess we gotta wait for what ICC decides.
Let me just throw this out here for you, and I don't know how ICC does it, but I know that you're opposed to the being a part of the ICC group that we created on Facebook, but thought process is you could always join that group and go live, and we could meet at that group.
That's
for a live. So-
Does it do group meetings? I mean, group?
Yeah, he can
Okay.
go live, and anybody that's
That's a
Okay.
in there
possibility.
could.
That's what another thing
Just
we can
saying.
consider.
And then when school resumes, you get your ass back out of our
Yeah.
There's
I've
also,
always said that that's your
Google
place
Hangouts.
and that I don't want to be there.
I get
don't
that,
wanna
but
intrude on your
It might be
territory.
easier
It might be easier in this unknown
There's
territory.
post-apocalyptic viral outbreak.
Yeah.